Less than 2 weeks ago, the WHO reported suspicions of an outbreak of one of the most famously underestimated plagues of our time, the yellow fever. Yellow fever goes virtually unacknowledged by Western society as a modern threat to the human population. Despite this, both history and current events blatantly show that yellow fever should be a crucial and grave concern of today. Outbreaks of this disease have recurred continuously throughout the past 2 centuries, placing yellow fever among the most common viral infections in the world. Yellow fever's most deadly and widespread claims to human lives have been relatively recent, but by no means is this disease new to the world. It's believed to have originated in Africa, and later been carried across the Atlantic to the Americas in the 16 and 1700s. The virus, called flavivirus, is carried by mosquito from one victim to the next. The first of 2 forms of the disease, sylvatic fever, involves transmission from or between monkeys, the fever's original hosts. However, once a human acquires a sylvatic disease and returns to his or her community, the yellow fever's urban spread is nearly inevitable. To make matters worse, breeding mosquitoes that carry the virus pass the infection on to their offspring, and once these reach maturity, yellow fever spreads among humans at an astounding rate. This variety of transmission among humans is called urban fever, or epidemic fever. The symptoms of yellow fever vary with the 5 stages of activity of the virus itself. The initial incubation period shows no symptoms, but is followed by a 2 to 5 day invasion when the host experiences chills, headaches, backaches, nausea, fever, slowed heart rate, fatigue, and the strange appearance of a white, furry coating on the center of the tongue. After a symptomless remission, the intoxication sets in, the most dangerous and deadly phase of the illness. For 3 to 9 days, the internal organs go through a severe deterioration and collapse, resulting in jaundice from liver damage, black vomit because of the presence of blood, and the loss of protein through urine due to kidney damage. The classical symptom of jaundice, in which the whites of the eyes and the skin assume a yellowish tint, is what gives yellow fever its name. Patients who survive the severity of intoxication recover their health quickly, as if nothing had happened. The 17D vaccine, developed by a team of researchers in 1927, is to this day the safest and most effective antiviral vaccine ever created. In the U.S. today, the risk of contracting yellow fever almost exclusively involves traveling to one of the tropical danger zones where it has been reported. Immunizations in the U.S., Europe, and Asia typically involve only military personnel. However, the CDC strongly and publicly suggests that all residents of and travelers to South America and African countries where cases have been reported should be officially vaccinated. Regrettably, the CDC has offered virtually no funding to actually carry through with such ambitious yet indispensable plans. The areas most at risk are within the regions of South America and Africa, sometimes known as the Yellow Fever Belt. The endemic zone in South America includes nearly all of the northern and central countries, excluding Argentina, Uruguay, and strips of coastline to the far west and east. In Africa, the endemic zone stretches in a 2,000-mile wide band between the far north and far south of the continent. In addition to the dangers of illness and political turmoil in many of these countries, each is a globally recognized less developed country. Most are also third world countries. While the 17D vaccine is incredibly effective, we cannot overlook the fact that there is no medical treatment for yellow fever. Quarantine has been attempted and sometimes is successful, but because of the independent vector who can move about on its own, an effective quarantine in less developed countries is nearly impossible. Yellow fever is classified as a re-emergent disease, with over 200,000 cases and 30,000 deaths per year. This estimated image of a 15% chance of fatality is lower in some countries and much higher in others. The number of cases per year reached an incredible peak in the late 80s with the South American epidemic, dropped substantially in the 90s, and now is beginning a steady climb back up. Even worse, the number of countries reporting regular cases of the disease has been on a relentless increase since the 80s. Not only are there more victims of yellow fever, but its influence is spreading geographically as we speak. Since the first recorded epidemic in 1648, there have been over a dozen major outbreaks of yellow fever in the world. Of these cases, one of the most devastating and deadly outbreaks was that of South America, specifically Brazil, in 1985. Between 1985 and 1999, a group of 7 South American countries, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and French Guiana, reported a total of 2,935 cases and 1,764 deaths. 80% of these reports came from Bolivia and Peru. In the next decade, these astounding numbers decreased dramatically, but even in 2000, Brazil accounted for 90% of the cases in the region. However, any figure reported in the less developed countries of South America and Africa is subject to some questioning. Underreporting is a constant problem, especially with cases in the tropical wilderness and among undercover criminals who take refuge there. It's clear that yellow fever is anything but a dead disease, and with general awareness as it is, an epidemic is just waiting to happen. Since January, floods have been reported in 47 countries and regions of South and Central America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, and Indonesia. Many of those regions experienced floods more than once this year, and every one of them is in danger of a yellow fever outbreak. Mosquitoes breed in standing water, and since this disease can be transmitted by a carrying mosquito as well as by its offspring, yellow fever thrives in such conditions. And on October 19th, just this month, the WHO began investigating 28 suspiciously familiar deaths near the Nile River in Sudan. On behalf of the countries in peril of a yellow fever outbreak at any moment, I ask $2.5 billion to provide for the cost of vaccines, medics, nurses, stations, supervisors, and medical equipment to begin a yellow fever vaccination campaign in the South American and African endemic zones. In addition, I request whatever funds you can donate for research to develop an effective treatment against this disease.